Well, you've seen the performance curve before. What I'd like to do is talk about a question that parents always ask me. How do I know when my child's life is out of balance? Because what we really want to do is try to find ways to optimize that balance so that the child's level of alertness and arousal increases their performance, and that they're at the peak of the curve rather at the low end where they're not engaged, or at the high end where they're so stressed out that they're withdrawing or they're acting out so that they can't perform. As you've heard from the very first today when we had Dr. Abaduro speak, family and community are critical. You guys, by coming here, are educating yourselves about the syndrome, and by looking at our website, the consequences of the syndrome in regards to medical issues as well as neurocognitive issues. And by doing that, you have to take the step to educate others in the community. So many times families tell me, our teachers don't know anything about it, or our physicians don't know anything about it, or this is the first time the speech and language pathologist has seen a child with this kind of condition. That is the unfortunate fact of this disorder, since it is relatively rare, although it is one of the more common causes of developmental disabilities. You are often the person who's educating the professionals. Secondly, many times we're really focused on how can we improve the child's academic performance, because we want the child to be able to succeed as an adult, and we feel that academics is a critical mark of whether or not they will be able to succeed. But indeed, for people who have learning disorders, one of the most critical factors that determines long-term outcome and success are social skills, being able to get along with others, make friends, and keep friends. So it's very important that you think about domains separate from academics. Those include social skills, emotional coping skills, adaptive functioning, such as being able to make change. But is algebra going to be as important for your child as being able to count change from $1? And how do you make some of those decisions about those life-determining academic subjects? What I have here are 3 notes that a 12-year-old wrote her mother. I want you to not only read the content of these notes, which I'll read to you in a moment, but also look at the process and try and put yourself in this 12-year-old girl's shoes. Her first note: I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't know how to explain. If I did say it with attitude, is what she meant, I didn't mean it. I was just trying to be funny. I know I made a really bad decision, but I thought if I was funny, we wouldn't have as many arguments. But when I tried, it didn't seem to work. Now this is the bad decision, but I tried again. And she drew tears coming out of the sad face. I really didn't want you to remind me and tell me to speed up, but I tried a second time anyways. I'm sorry. Remember, time is an issue for our children. Second note that she wrote, I don't know how many weeks later, or days later even. Well, like eating. That's wrong. How am I supposed to do all those things? What if I can't? What if I can't do things the way that you want? I positively am, she forgot. Sure, I want to do what you want to, but how? Amy, please send a note back. And then her last note: I'm very sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to make you mad. I thought you meant just that one scrap. So here we're seeing evidence not only of the time problems, the spatial problems, but some of the feeling of overwhelmed, anxiety about not being able to meet parents' expectations, and sadness that comes from that. Your child's behaviors tell you whether or not life is out of balance. Let's see what the mother wrote back to her child. Amy, I don't want you to feel like you need to say you're sorry so often. What I'm really hoping for is that you will think about doing things on your own. without me having to tell you. You are getting older now. I need for you to take a little more responsibility for yourself. Showering, keeping your room clean, picking up after yourself, closing drawers, turning the lights off, starting your homework on time, eating better foods. You do all of these things. I just need for you to do them more regularly. I'm proud of you, and I love you with all of my heart. That never changes. And then she started to sign her first name, Kath, but then changed it to Mommy. Let's talk a little bit about resilience, potential protective factors, and risk factors. In the environment, if your expectations and the school's expectations match what the child's abilities are, you will have a resilient child. If you model how to cope adaptively, you will have a resilient child. How many of you actually talk out loud when you're feeling stressed, what you're doing to cope with your stress? How many of you talk about what's going on inside your body so your child can begin to hear what are the cues that stress is coming on? How many of you actively do things to cope with stress, like say to your child, I'm going to go out for a run now because I'm needing to take a stress break. Or, gosh, I'm eating ice cream right now because I'm just really to the max and I need to comfort myself. Remember, our child who has the chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome does not learn well by observing. They have that nonverbal learning disorder. They learn better by words and by hearing you talk about what you're doing. So you not only model nonverbally taking that run, but you talk about it and you say why you're doing it. And you talk about what leads up to it, and you talk about how you feel afterwards, how it affected your level of stress. The other important part is that weaknesses are supported. Do you remember seeing all the spelling errors that that child had? She's not going to do well in school with writing, but there are things out there, text-to-speech, for example, software, special software that teaches you how to spell correctly, that will support those weaknesses. That helps you have a resilient child. As an individual, the child also has protective factors. We see this all the time in the clinic. I can't tell you how many times children try to talk with me about what their interests are and just turn on the charm to avoid doing the tasks. They want to talk about the next basketball t-shirt that they're going to get. They want to talk about what they're going to do when they go to the zoo. They want to talk about the newest video game that they're playing, rather than doing the testing that I need them to do. This is all their attempt to cope with their anxiety. Their effort and their persistence is always what we see as their strengths. Many also have personal talents that need support. What are risk factors? Incomplete medical workups. We see these kids often having fatigue. The fatigue may come from being in a mismatch with the environment where their cognitive abilities can't match the environment expectations. But it also can have medical risk too, and that needs to be examined. We also see that the anxiety is not understood or is misunderstood, so that a child who might be withdrawing or a child who might be having oppositional defiant disorder is considered to be a bad child. They aren't working hard enough, they're being lazy, or they're talking back, when in fact what they're trying to do is communicate that they're anxious and that they're overwhelmed. And if you work on a model where you're just only disciplining by applying consequences, you aren't working on a model that will help this child. You have to look at what's leading up to the anxiety and working on trying to treat the anxiety and try and change the situation so the child isn't so anxious. And then, as Elliot so nicely pointed out, there are challenges locating resources and services. You know, one of the resources we've talked about to work with anxiety is the Coping CAP program and the Camp Cope A Lot program. But I do want to tell you about a new program that's available that does not require the fees that the Coping CAP program does or that the Camp Cope A Lot program does, and that's called Turnaround Fear. And you can get it for 90 days free and try it. It does not necessarily involve doing it with a therapist, but it has all of the same background research that cognitive behavior therapy, like the Camp Copilot program does. Your child's behavior tells you whether or not things are balanced.